a lot of crypto journalism is just paid advertisement that isn't being disclosed. So, we get so many pitches every day from people who are wanting to pay for articles and are asking for them for that to not be disclosed.
Welcome to Beyond the Beat, a podcast by Chain Story, the agency to elevate your status in crypto. I'm your host, Pedro, and every week we'll be talking to the people in crypto media. We'll be telling their stories, their failures, their lessons, and whatever tips or tricks they've got up their sleeves.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Beat. And this was a very exciting one for me. I'm here with one of the best journalists in the space.
Thank you.
And I'm not just saying that because you're my boss.
Of course not.
I truly believe that. But yeah, I'm here with Camila Russo from the Defiant. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Pedro, for having me.
This is happening in Buenos Aires, which is where I'm going to say, like, quote unquote, you got your journalistic legs, so to speak.
Yeah.
You started out at Bloomberg. And yeah, I'd love if you could tell me a little bit about what that initial experience was. Because Bloomberg was your first job, like, as a journalist.
No, not really. My first job was at El Mercurio in Chile.
No way.
Yeah, so studied journalism in Chile at Universidad Católica. Then I did an internship at El Mercurio, and I stayed there in the international section for about a year. The story about El Mercurio is kind of funny. Like, it's like the only internship I applied to after Universidad Católica. And I did the test and went through the whole thing. And then they called me to join the culture section.
Okay.
It's like taking like not culture, the social pages.
Yeah, all right.
So like going to a gallery opening, and I'm like, I'm not gonna spend like entire summer like putting the like names of their socialite pictures.
Yeah, because the social is just the photos with the
like a small kind of blur. And I told them no, and they're like, "What? You're saying no to El Mercurio?" I'm like, "I'm not gonna be like a journalist for the social pages." And then they called me back, and they're like, "Fine, you can."
Wow, that was an impactful no then.
Yeah.
They must have been taken aback by it.
Yeah, they're like, "What? You're saying no to us?" I'm like, "Yeah."
That's fun.
And they called me back to be part of the international center where I stayed. But then, after some time there, I'm like, it felt a bit like I didn't want to stay like my entire life there. There was this woman sitting beside me who had been at that same spot for like 20 years. I'm like, I don't want to be that.
Did you envision yourself as that woman?
I saw her, and I'm like, because like once you get to El Mercurio, I guess you just don't leave.
Yeah. Well, for those that are listening, and Mercurio is like, I think it's the second or third most read newspaper in Chile. Because first it's La Cuarta, and then I think it's in Mercurio.
Yeah, right. And La Cuarta doesn't have like the prestige. So yeah, it would have been like tough to leave, and I'm like, no, I need to like do something else. So I applied to different journalism schools in the U.S. With the goal of working in a big U.S. media company. And so I got into Northwestern, and after that, doing the master's degree there, I applied for an internship at Bloomberg. And that was a funny story too, how I ended up actually being hired at Bloomberg. So I was doing an internship in the emerging markets team at Bloomberg News in New York. And the internship went really well. Like, my team leader had like really positive feedback. Like, I was doing great. And at the end of the internship, all the intern class was getting calls to tell them whether they were in or out, hired or no. And I got a call, and they were like, "I'm sorry, we don't have a place for you." No, it didn't work out.
Good luck.
Yeah. And I was like, I couldn't believe it, like, because I had no reason to believe that I wouldn't be hired. Like, I had done everything right. So I went to my team lead and asked him what's up, and that they should reconsider that I was the best fit for Bloomberg, and that they should hire me. And he's like, you know what? Yeah, like, I'm gonna make a case for you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But this was like, I was like with one foot out the door. Like they had like a big intern dinner. And it was like so shitty because it was like the interns that had been hired and those who hadn't in the same dinner.
Oh my God, that sounds painful.
It was so painful for me, and plus like.
But that dinner was before your team lead had said, "I'm gonna make the case for you." So you were like in the dark right now.
I was still in the dark, and
Yeah.
I still thought I was probably, most likely leaving, and so it's just like so tough. And I remember like after that dinner, just like walking by Central Park and being like, "No, I'm gonna have to leave, like go back to Chile, with nothing, And then like he ended up convincing, I don't know, higher ups that they would give me another like 3-month tryout.
Okay.
So they didn't like right away hire. They're like, fine, like we'll give you another like 3 months. And after that, like obviously not obviously because I was there for 8 years after that. Like they ended up hiring me.
Yeah. 8 years and 3 months tranches.
Yes, right. But so it was a roller coaster.
Did you ever find out why they said no in the beginning?
No,
Nobody gave you any feedback. It's just like, nah.
No, and I actually like had conversations with my team lead and like with the managing editor of emerging markets, and they never told me. They're like, I don't know what happened, and so, we're so glad to have you on the team now. And then like I don't know, like by the time I had been at Bloomberg a couple of years, my team lead like we always like joked about that, like, oh my God, you were almost out the door, and now you're just like.
Now we can't get you out the door.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess like a lesson in there somehow. I think that really stuck with me to just like don't take no for an answer. Or, like just like go for what you want. Like in the case in Mercurio, it was I want to be there, but I don't want to be in the social pages.
Yeah.
And at Bloomberg, I'm like, I really did feel like I was a good journalist. And there was like no reason why they shouldn't hire me. So I wasn't just going to like take no right away.
What was the experience like working at Bloomberg? Because I think like Bloomberg is one of the most prestigious media outlets in the world. Do you feel like it is as prestigious from the like on the inside as it appears on the outside? If that makes sense.
I respect Bloomberg a lot more after having worked there than I did as a kind of outsider. I think it's really impressive how they have these like sets of standards, and everyone at the news organization enforces them. And like believes in them, and it's something that comes like from everywhere in the organization. Like there's a lot of belief in getting to like reporting the truth, and data is very much obviously at the core of it, but also just like very just like classic journalism standards of like first-hand information and having appropriate sourcing, and editors are so strict with those things. And as a journalist, like it was sometimes frustrating because like maybe I had a scoop, but I had like one first-hand source who had it, and they would just like not let me publish it.
One source wasn't enough.
No, you had to have, I don't know, like it was like a meeting that happened, and I had like one person who was at that meeting who was telling me whatever was talked about, but that wasn't enough. Like I had to get another confirmation of that, like that sort of thing. And it was frustrating, but in the end, like it really did instill in me the importance of just like following these journalism standards and like fact checking, the importance of accuracy. And at Bloomberg, like speed is everything, but but accuracy is even more important. So it's like all these lessons that really just like get drilled in your brain especially as a journalist starting out. So yeah, it really kind of sets my foundation for what I believe journalism should be like. Obviously, the just like strict line between what's editorial content and paid, like that was never ever even considered that you would take any payment for your editorial coverage. And I think like Bloomberg is in such a privileged position because their data terminals is what maintains the news business.
Right.
So they're not kind of as they don't rely on advertisement as much. So there's like no degree of outside influence that journalists have. So I think I think maybe that's a big reason why why for me it's just so important that those two should never touch. Like I was just the way I did journalism and I learned the profession. It was just like never even a possibility. So that's something that I wanted to bring to crypto.
Right. Do you think that, like, if you were to place sort of traditional media, do you think that, like, Bloomberg and other outlets like it, let's say go to even, for example, The Guardian or the New York Times or even The Atlantic, some of these new ones that are coming out, do you think that they're doing a good job according to these sort of stringent guidelines for what journalism is, for what investigations are, for how editing should look like, even not being on the inside? I know this is just like your view from the outside.
And it's hard to say from the outside. I think somewhat. I think I guess like my problem with media, with traditional media, and maybe just like speaking just about U.S. media, since that's kind of what I consume right now. But I do feel like there's more bias. That there is, like, it's become a bit more political. I don't know, just like you mentioned the New York Times, I think has become just increasingly biased.
Yeah. For a while now.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't that way. I mean, this is just like a very subjective take. Like from my perspective, the New York Times was a lot more trustworthy maybe 10 years ago, and it's become gradually more biased to the point where even if it's kind of like maybe positions that I may agree with, but I want journalism that's objective, that's just like telling me things in a balanced way and trusting me as a reader that I can make a smart decision on like what to think about it. Okay. But I feel like now at least US media outlets are becoming more and more opinionated. And at least for me, for like in the case of like mass media, like the New York Times or Bloomberg, I don't think that's their role.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, it ends up becoming this sort of strange, like the idea of like manufacturing consent. And so it just becomes like, okay, I'm skewing the conversation in one direction or I'm pushing it in the other. But do you not also think that there is a space for like certain journalists or certain stories to get like that inner voice, like from the person that's reporting it? Because I'm also a bigger fan of, I think, that straight, tell me the story how it went and I'll make up my decision for however I want to. But then I do think that the person that wrote it, that reported it, is one of the people that best understands what happens. And so sometimes it is interesting to get that perspective and to get that opinion and to sort of feel what they were thinking and have like some sort of guide in that process, I
think there's like different spaces and outlets for that, and I don't think like a straight news article should be that. So there's an opinion section for a reason. There's like maybe the reporters more like personal social media, maybe yeah, maybe just like a conversation like this is a space where a reporter can have more freedom to give their opinions. But when
Feel
it's
free,
just like,
please. Feel free.
when yeah, right. But like when it's just like reporting on the news, on the facts, I don't know. I believe that like what we do at the Defiant, I like to have this like the nut graph, like the so what, and I think that's a space where the reporter can give their own analysis, but it's and just like maybe nudge the reader in kind of the direction, but it's more of like providing context, like giving more color, explaining like why the story is relevant. I think like that's what a reporter's role should be in a news story. So it's like it's like providing context right before the point where you're saying, okay, this is what like exactly what I think, you know?
Right. Do you think that taking it into like crypto and like the crypto media space especially, do you think that we do a good job as like, are you critical of the like crypto media complex, to call it something?
Oh yeah, I'm super critical of it. I think there's so much wrong with it. I mean, just to
Fire away, shots fired. That's
I think like just to establish that I think it's a lot better than it used to be. I think there is like crypto coverage is so much more mature and just better than it was, I don't know, 5 years ago. We have more outlets covering crypto and just like crypto dedicated outlets, and also traditional media covering the space as well in just like a more dedicated way, which just like provides better coverage as a whole. So I think things are improving, but I think there's still a lot to do. And the main thing that I always been critical about crypto media is how much it's pay to play. Like just like a lot of crypto journalism is just paid advertisement that isn't being disclosed. So, you know, we get so many pitches every day from people who are wanting to pay for articles and are asking for them for that to not be disclosed. And so, you know, like obviously others are doing it. Like we've seen the media kits of people offering that. So that's happening. And then I think there's a lot of conflict of interest as well. So there are very few independent media companies. Many crypto media companies are owned by exchanges or funds or have an investment arm.
Do you think it's possible to sort of divorce the two though? Like this is something I think about a lot, this idea of like vested interests and like, okay, so I don't know, Bullish acquires CoinDesk, for example. But do you think that it is still possible to be acquired by like a commercial company and still maintain some degree or still maintain like editorial independence?
Yeah, and I think CoinDesk does maintain editorial independence, but I think the issue is that you open yourself up to being questioned, right?
Bad luck.
Yeah. It's you know, it's like I don't think that CoinDesk is being influenced. Just like for the record, like I think
You're on the record.
Yeah, I am on the record, and yeah, like just to say that I think they do excellent journalism, and I doubt that Bullish is like they're like influencing coverage, but you do expose yourself to that question and to maybe, you know, trust eroding gradually down the line, you know, like I don't know, one day Bullish makes a huge investment in some crypto company, and then every time CoinDesk covers that company, there is going to be that question of like, are they covering it because Bullish is an investor, or are they not covering it because Bullish is an investor, as an example.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, like there is so little trust in media as it is that you don't want to give readers another reason to not trust. right? And I think that's a problem with a lot of crypto media that are, they're being owned by like parties that have that can influence them, or they have the investment arms that can
Where do you stand on the idea of like crypto journalists or journalists that hold crypto and then that still report on the industry? Like, because at the Defiant, we're like a pro-industry publication. And so it's kind of expected that we're going to be playing on chain, doing stuff, holders, all that sort of thing. But then there's other publications, and I've talked to other journalists and editors in the space, and they're like, yeah, nah, you can't have this sort of financial interest because it's the same sort of thing. It's going to, like, the idea is like it's going to skew your reporting in favor of something or in favor of the other.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that debate? I mean, the Defiant aside, but like when you take a look at sort of the broader ecosystem.
Before we getting into that, just so we were talking about like things wrong with crypto media. So like conflict of interest is one, but I also wanted to mention just, how little resources there is for investigative journalism. I think there's like so much wrongdoing that happens. And unfortunately, there's just like very little resources to cover it. So I think that's greatly lacking. And unfortunately, at the Defiant, we are a part of this too. Like, we don't have the resources and time to devote to like really doing investigative journalism, and it's just like an industry-wide, not for crypto, but like an industry-wide problem that it's very hard to fund that sort of journalism.
Let's take this point and run, because I think this is a great topic, because I totally agree that there's a huge lack in investigative journalists. How do we fix it though? Like, how do you think? I mean, obviously more money is the clear, obvious answer, but then there's also the question, all right, speed. So you need to be putting out articles every day to be able to be paying for the lights.
Yep.
And then you need to find that sort of, because I know we've been trying to push out more features and longer stories, but yeah, how do we?
It's a hard question.
It's so hard.
It's like, how do we fix media, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Should we bring a pen and paper or start drawing on the blackboard?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it is the kind of work that needs to be done. Just like actually thinking about how to improve the business model for media so that investigative journalism is sustainable. But for crypto specifically, it's also a problem of scale. There's like how many, maybe like 5 big crypto publications with some sort of budget. So if your scale is so small, then the money that's dedicated to investigative journalism is even less than for like more mainstream topics. So what happens is that so much wrongdoing in crypto gets uncovered or doesn't get covered.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a huge problem. Unfortunately, like I don't have an easy solution for it. As you know, like I'd love to think that we can use crypto to solve it. Actually, I think we can use some sort of incentive model or something. It's something that here at Crecimiento we've been kind of brainstorming. But yeah, I think that's for a longer conversation.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think that there's an interesting idea to do this sort of investigative bounty, like you can create some sort of, I don't know if DAO or what to do, because obviously then you toss in the idea of a token or something like that. It gets a bit iffy for a lot of people. But there's an idea like, all right, crowdfunding or investigative journalism with bounties, give this sort of platform.
Bounties, like it's about restructuring incentives so that investigative journalism makes sense.
Where do you stand? Where do you see the sort of independent journalists sort of going into? Because I mean, there's the classic cliche, like the media is always 5 years away from death, and like journalism is, or people are. I've heard a bunch of people that think that now with AI, journalists aren't going to exist, or media companies. The sort of idea of like, you need to. Like business models are a bit screwed up and all that sort of stuff. Where do you see like independent journalists playing a role in, especially something where you have the internet where everything can scale a lot easier, But then you have the idea of like fake news, misinformation, and you don't really know exactly what's true, what's not true. Like one of the things that I find really important in journalism, if you had those like checks and balances, like I'll write an article and then you'll look at it and you'll see the sources, and there's going to be a couple eyes looking at it. But then you have these like one-man show or one-woman show. But I still think that those independent journalists are super important because there are a lot of times they're covering stuff that's not getting covered.
Yeah. I think, they are, they're very necessary to just like the information landscape as a whole. I think it's not one or the other. I think it's media organizations and independent journalists play a role in breaking news and bringing information to light. But I think it's, audiences should be aware of of how different those sources are. So, like you said, like an independent content creator won't have those checks and balances that a news organization provides. So maybe the facts won't be checked as rigorously. Probably, most likely with individual, like independent content creators, they will introduce their own bias into their story. So that's something that audiences need to be aware of. But I think those two sides like complement each other. Many times content creators end up being sources for news organizations. Like they might be quicker, maybe they can break news, but like then news organizations can take and continue developing. I think that they're both needed, and that audiences should be aware of kind of the limitations of both.
You said something before a while ago in the conversation that you thought you were doing good journalism, or that you're like you put in the steps in those early days in Bloomberg to being a good journalist. What does that mean? What are the characteristics to you of a good journalist? What does a good journalist have to have?
Yeah. Okay.
Aside from a computer, something to take.
I think like just the drive to get to a good story, like to uncover something that hasn't been reported on. And I think it's that like obsessive drive to find that piece of news that nobody has covered. It's like that. To me, it's like such an adrenaline rush when I was breaking news. Like when I had a scoop, and so I think a good journalist is going after those scoops no matter what. Not with exceptions. Like I'm sure like break the law or something. Like with integrity, but you're taking like all the steps needed to get that piece of information, it means developing sources, being on the ground, like getting off the computer and like going to like, do in-person reporting. Because like it is a lot about just like developing those sources, not relying on just like, like Twitter and like press releases we get, just like doing the legwork to uncover information. And I think the more uncomfortable that information is, the better the journalist, because it means you are actually providing true value there. It's like you're uncovering something that wasn't known before. So yeah.
Where do you think the world would be without journalism? Because there's like, I don't know, there's a question that I sometimes had on my mind is like people don't really care about journalism or not journalism, but they always, I think it's also mixed in with this idea of like being very anti-media or like questioning media. And journalists just get tossed in the whole bag and everything is wrong and we shouldn't exist and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like without the media or without journalists, this would be a pretty wild place. And like then things would just get really just fucked up.
Yes, I agree. No, I think journalists and the media are hugely underestimated. I think people who are not journalists assume that the work we do is really easy and that everyone can do it kind of on their spare time, and that, you know, citizen journalists, which are just like people typing stuff up on Twitter or like on Substack, that's all they need. And it's so far from the truth because, like I said, like a true journalist, it's a hard full-time job of uncovering information, of building sources, of fact-checking, that people are not doing that on their side job, you know, like as a side hustle. And like, it is an actual full-time job that requires a lot of resources and time. So you need, like, organizations dedicated to that. That, like I said, like independent content creators are great and are needed, and they can help complement the job of journalists and of media organizations, but they are far from all that's needed in order to have all the information and news that society needs. I think if we had only independent content creators to rely on, I think we get a very polarized, biased view of the world, right? Like we wouldn't get this like objective, fact-checked news that the media provides.
Is everything news or is nothing news?
What do you mean?
Like, are there really that many news-worthy things happening in the world? Like, sometimes I wonder, like, I'll see an article that gets posted in some outlet, and then I'll see it across outlets, and there's a lot of stuff that isn't actually either that interesting or anything, but it's just like a constant churn of things having to constantly be put out, you know? Where do you stand? Like, when you look at something and you think, does it happen to you often? Like, you look at a story or an article or something and think, like, why was this written?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's, I don't know. I think it's, there's like a bar to meet for what's news for each organization. It depends on like the public that they're serving. What's news for us is not going to be news for the New York Times or for CoinDesk even. So it really depends on the audience what is news for each organization.
Is that something that you think about a lot or is that when you started out the Defiant and you started writing the newsletter, is that something that you would be constantly thinking about, like what does the audience want? Or was that something that you began to develop over time?
I think it's yeah. I started with that question because it's a need that I had myself. So I was looking for information about DeFi because I was writing my book and there was nothing about decentralized finance. And then, you know, I thought that there was a need for that information. There was like this emerging sector in crypto that wasn't being covered, that nobody was serving. So yeah, I was thinking about the teams building DeFi and the users of DeFi who had, you know, nowhere to see what was happening in that sector.
What's the hardest part about building a media company, being the editor-in-chief of a media company, being the CEO of a media company, being an author, an entrepreneur, a mother? But like coming back into, we'll leave part of that aside, but like, what's the hardest part? If there is just one, maybe there's obviously a bunch.
Yeah, no. The hardest part of being the CEO of a media company?
Yeah.
Keeping the lights on. Seriously.
Paying the bills.
Yeah, paying the bills. I mean, yeah, it's staying profitable. You know, like at the Defiant, we did take on a little bit of venture capital, which, as you know, I wanted to use for a data platform that didn't pan out. And then since we've been focused on creating content, the goal has always been to be self-sustainable and not rely on external funding. And yeah, I think all of the other hard decisions respond to that main goal, is to just like basically just stay alive,
Breathe, just
Yeah.
breathe.
Yeah.
And what would be the opposite side? So what's the most rewarding? Like when you feel that sort of rush of, I don't know, satisfaction or euphoria or something like that.
I think it's at events like these where, I run into people and they're like, the Defiant is what got me into crypto. I started listening to your podcast and quit my job and started my own crypto company. It's just like seeing the impact that we make on real people. Like there's real people who are opening up their email every day, reading our newsletter, and they rely on us to provide them with information and help them understand the world and their investments, or like the company that they're working for. Like I think we are making a real impact on real people. So that's definitely the most rewarding.
Yeah, no doubt. I always end these interviews or conversations with the same two questions.
Okay.
I'm a bookworm, and I'm always intrigued by what journalists are reading. And so the two questions are, what are you reading at the moment? And what book do you usually recommend? Or if it can be crypto related, it doesn't have to be obviously The Infinite Machine.
Yeah.
So that she wrote, that's a clear recommendation for the millions of viewers that we have. But yeah, it can be crypto. It doesn't have to be. You can go with it however you want. And what you're reading at the moment.
Okay. So right now I'm reading Shoe Dog by Solimano.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Have you read it?
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm like halfway through. Really great book. What book do I recommend? I guess like some of my favorites are like Michael Lewis books. So say like Liar's Poker. Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, like Michael Lewis and Truman Capote they're the ones who inspired me to write a book like The Infinite Machine. Like I always wanted to write like a nonfiction novel, like a fictionalized type of nonfiction book. And so yeah, like they've both had like such a huge influence on me. So I guess like In Cold Blood by Truman Capote and Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis.
Awesome recommendation. In Cold Blood was an article that turned into a book.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Would you recommend reading the article first before reading the book, or just go straight for the book?
No, straight for the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I didn't even read the article.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I've always been. I actually have never read it, but I know that it's on my reading list. It's on my reading list, and I was always intrigued by the fact that it was an article that turned into a book.
Yeah, because I don't think the article was like anything special. It was just like, this family got murdered here, and like it's just like a very kind of random like criminal article. But the book is like where he really kind of dives into the killer's perspective and into the family and like how it affected the town, and like so like the article is just gonna be just like any kind of random article, but like the book is what's worth.
Awesome. Excellent recommendations. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This has been wonderful.